Europe, the continent once praised for its equality, its compassion, its care for the vulnerable. But in 2025, that illusion is shattering, because behind the tourist-friendly streets, behind the cathedrals, behind the cafes and cobblestone dreams, millions are sleeping in tents on benches under bridges, forgotten, rejected, and most terrifyingly multiplying. Around 1.3 million people are currently homeless in Europe. Although the figures are a few years old, but if we talk about 2025, then this figure can increase to even 2 million. So in today's video, we are going to show you 10 European countries with the largest homeless population in 2025. You won't believe who's at number 1, where even citizens with jobs are now living in their cars, while illegal migrants get shelter. But before starting the video, I want to request you, we put our best efforts to create our every single video. So please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's start. Number 10, Portugal. Lisbon used to be a peaceful capital, a favorite for tourists. But walk its streets today, and you'll see the truth. Tents line Avenida de Liberdade, their worn fabrics flapping in the wind. Men dig through trash bins in Porto, searching for scraps to survive. Women sleep with one eye open under concrete overpasses, clutching their belongings tightly. In 2025, Portugal officially recorded over 27,000 homeless, a 30% jump from just 2 years ago. But unofficial numbers? Easily double, with estimates suggesting nearly 50,000 people are without stable housing. The crisis is no longer confined to urban centers. Even smaller towns like Coimbra and Faro report rising encampments. Inflation in food and rent has decimated the working class, with basic goods up 15% and rents in Lisbon soaring by 40% since 2022. Social services are overwhelmed, with shelters turning away dozens nightly due to lack of beds. Portugal's aging population adds pressure, as pensioners on fixed incomes compete for dwindling affordable housing. The country is also grappling with waves of asylum seekers and immigrants, not only from Africa and Brazil but also from South Asia, particularly Bangladesh and Pakistan, and conflict zones like Ukraine and Syria. Over 50,000 non-European immigrants arrived in 2024 alone, many fleeing war, poverty, or climate disasters. This influx, while culturally enriching, has stretched Portugal's already thin safety nets to the breaking point, with local councils struggling to provide basic services. What's worse, some cities are quietly removing benches, covering warm vents, and installing spikes to deter the homeless. A desperate bid to hide the crisis from tourists. The economic fallout from global crises, including supply chain disruptions and energy price spikes, has hit Portugal hard. Fishermen in the Algarve can't afford fuel, and small businesses in Lisbon are shuttering. With a non-European population now nearing 10% of the country's total, integration challenges are mounting. Language barriers and limited job opportunities leave many immigrants vulnerable to exploitation or homelessness themselves. Number 9, Sweden. Sweden, once the poster child of the welfare state, is now facing a silent implosion. In 2025, the country is grappling with over 44,000 homeless, including 1 in 6 migrants in cities like Malmö and Stockholm. The crisis cuts deep, with urban areas swelling with makeshift shelters and overcrowded streets. Swedish shelters are at breaking point, turning away families nightly. The country's generous refugee policies from past decades, once a point of pride, are now backfiring. Many immigrants, particularly from Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia, struggle to find stable work or affordable housing, leaving them trapped in a cycle of poverty and exclusion. They've become Sweden's invisible population, often ignored by mainstream discourse. Native Swedes aren't spared either. Job automation in industries like manufacturing, coupled with a 20% rise in mental health issues over the past 5 years, has pushed many into precarious living situations. The housing market, squeezed by foreign investors and speculative buying, has driven rents in Stockholm up by 35% since 2020, pricing out even middle-class families. Worse still, Sweden has criminalized tent cities, outlawing encampments in public spaces. This leaves thousands with no legal place to sleep, forcing them into hidden corners or abandoned buildings. Municipalities have ramped up evictions, with police dismantling camps in Gothenburg and Uppsala, Yet the government offers no real solutions. Public silence on the issue is deafening, as policymakers avoid confronting the scale of the crisis. Sweden's social fabric is fraying. The non-European population, now over 15% of the country, faces growing resentment from far-right factions, while economic pressures like inflation and energy costs hit everyone hard. Food prices have spiked 12% in 2 years, and small businesses are closing at record rates. The welfare state, once a beacon, is buckling under the weight of these converging crises, and no one is talking about it. Number 8. France. France isn't just dealing with homelessness, it's fighting a social explosion. In 2025, over 500,000 people are classified as homeless, a sharp rise from 300,000 in 2023, with numbers still climbing. The crisis is engulfing the nation, and no city is spared. Paris, Lyon, Marseille, they're drowning in chaos. Underpasses have become sprawling migrant camps, housing families from North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East. Railway stations double as makeshift shelters, with people huddled under blankets amid bustling crowds. Weekly riots erupt in the banlieues, where undocumented families face mass evictions, their belongings scattered in the streets. Macron's government has doubled down, tightening asylum policies and deporting thousands, sparking fierce backlash from both migrant communities and activists. Far-right groups are gaining traction, fueling tensions with the non-European population, now estimated at 12% of France's total. Meanwhile, native French citizens are slipping through the cracks. Single mothers, pensioners, and even young professionals are living in cars, squatting in abandoned buildings, or camping in forests as rents soar 25% in urban centers since 2022. French police admit they've lost control of entire zones, particularly in Marseille's northern districts and Paris's 18th arrondissement, where crime and desperation intertwine. Social services are overwhelmed, with shelters turning away hundreds nightly and food banks running dry. Inflation, up 10% for essentials like bread and fuel, is crushing the working class, while energy costs have forced small businesses to shutter. France is burning from within, and homelessness isn't just a statistic, it's a national emergency. The government's response, a mix of crackdowns and underfunded aid programs, is failing to stem the tide. As the non-European population grows and economic pressures mount, the social fabric is unraveling, and the crisis is only getting louder. Number 7. Ireland. A country once praised for its rising economy, is now buried in a housing nightmare. In 2025, over 23,000 people are officially homeless, including record-breaking numbers of children and entire families, with more than 7,000 minors reported in emergency accommodations. The crisis is tearing at the nation's core, and no solution is in sight. Dublin is the epicenter, where rents have skyrocketed by 30% since 2022, rendering housing unaffordable for even teachers, nurses, and other essential workers. Many are forced into hostels, shared flats, or worse, the streets. The government points to a housing shortage, but the truth cuts deeper. Corporate greed and systemic failures are choking the market. Property investors, both domestic and international, have swallowed up available homes, converting them into high-cost rentals or short-term tourist lets. Immigration pressures are mounting, with Ireland seeing an influx of over 40,000 non-European migrants in 2024 alone, primarily from Nigeria, India, and Ukraine, straining already scarce resources. Meanwhile, drug abuse, particularly among youth, is exploding, with heroin and methamphetamine use driving a surge in rough sleeping and petty crime in cities like Cork and Galway. The Irish government admits at least 2,000 people sleep rough each night, but critics argue the real figure could be closer to 5,000, as many avoid official counts. Social services are crumbling, with shelters overflowing and waitlists for public housing stretching years. Inflation, up 12% for food and utilities, is pushing even stable families toward the edge, while the non-European population, now nearing 10% of Ireland's total, faces growing hostility in some communities. Ireland is cracking under the weight of its own success. The Celtic Tiger's legacy has morphed into a crisis of inequality, addiction, and displacement, and the government's half measures, like temporary rent caps, are failing to stem the tide. Homelessness isn't just a problem, it's a national shame. Number 6. Greece. Greece has never fully recovered from the economic crash, and in 2025, the situation is grimmer than ever. Over 31,000 people are homeless, and the streets of Athens resemble a humanitarian disaster zone. Unemployment hovers at 15%, with youth joblessness nearing 30%. Pensions, slashed by 40% since the 2008 crisis, have left retirees destitute. Many Greeks who once owned homes are now begging in the same neighborhoods they grew up in, their lives upended by a decade of austerity. The migrant crisis has pushed the country over the edge. Greece remains the primary entry point for thousands fleeing conflict and poverty in the Middle East, North Africa, and increasingly South Asia, with over 60,000 arrivals in 2024 alone, mostly from Syria, Afghanistan, and Eritrea. Camps in Lesbos and Samos are overflowing, with reports of squalid conditions and rampant disease. The non-European population, now over 12% of Greece's total, has sparked tensions, as locals grow restless over strained resources and rising crime in urban areas. The government, stretched thin, is quietly deporting both undocumented migrants and, in some cases, vulnerable locals misclassified in sweeps to reduce numbers. Social services are collapsing, with shelters in Athens and Thessaloniki turning away hundreds nightly. Inflation has driven food prices up 18%, and small businesses, especially in tourist-heavy areas, are closing as costs soar. In a shocking report, dozens of elderly Greeks were found living in caves near Thessaloniki, scavenging for food and water. These are not isolated cases but symptoms of a broader collapse, as the elderly and working poor alike are abandoned by a system buckling under pressure. This is not ancient history. This is Europe in 2025, where Greece's storied past is overshadowed by a present of despair and displacement. Number 5. Netherlands. The Netherlands, one of Europe's richest nations, is grappling with a staggering crisis. Over 50,000 people are homeless in 2025, a number that defies the country's wealth and reputation. The housing market is utterly broken. Social housing, once a cornerstone of Dutch society, is now a lottery system with waitlists stretching up to a decade in cities like Amsterdam and Utrecht. Skyrocketing rents, up 35% in urban centers since 2022, have made housing unaffordable, even for full-time workers like teachers and healthcare professionals, many of whom are forced into shelters or temporary accommodations. The most heartbreaking reality? Thousands of those homeless are children. Dutch media reports paint a grim picture: primary school students arriving at class hungry, unwashed, and exhausted, their families unable to secure stable housing. The non-European population, now over 10% of the country, faces additional barriers, with migrants from Morocco, Turkey, and recent arrivals from Ukraine and Eritrea often stuck in overcrowded reception centers or on the streets. The government's response, food aid, emergency beds, and temporary shelters, offers no permanent fix. Social services are overwhelmed, with NGOs reporting a 20% increase in demand for basic necessities like clothing and hygiene products. Economic pressures, including 15% inflation on essentials like food and energy, are pushing even middle-class families to the brink. Meanwhile, property investors and a surge in short-term rentals for tourists have choked the supply of affordable homes. Behind the Netherlands' progressive image lies a harsh truth. The country is losing its grip on dignity. As encampments grow in Rotterdam and The Hague, and as child poverty becomes impossible to ignore, the world is starting to notice the cracks in this once model society. Number 4. Italy. Italy's streets have become a permanent refugee route, and now, Italians themselves are joining the lines in a spiraling crisis. In 2025, Italy reports over 150,000 homeless people, with Rome, Milan, and Naples emerging as hotspots of despair. The crisis has engulfed both urban and rural areas, painting a stark picture of a nation unraveling. Italy is grappling with two distinct homeless populations: undocumented migrants, primarily from sub-Saharan Africa, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, pushed out of an overwhelmed asylum system, and native Italians ruined by unemployment rates hovering at 10%, rampant inflation and failing social programs. The non-European population, now exceeding 9% of Italy's total, faces increasing hostility as resources dwindle, while locals struggle alongside them. Tens of thousands live in makeshift shelters near train stations or along highways, from Turin to Bari. Organized gangs have taken control of some encampments, extorting homeless individuals for protection and space, turning desperation into a business. In Palermo, entire families squat in abandoned government buildings, relying on candles for light and boiling water in tin cans to survive. Reports from Naples describe children scavenging for food in markets, a sight once unthinkable in Italy's vibrant cities. Economic pressures are relentless. Food prices have surged 14% since 2023, and energy costs have crippled small businesses, with over 5,000 closures in 2024 alone. Social services are collapsing, with shelters in Milan and Rome turning away hundreds nightly. The Italian government, paralyzed by political infighting and coalition breakdowns, offers little beyond temporary aid and empty promises, leaving NGOs and local communities to fill the gaps. This is Italy in 2025, a nation where ancient ruins stand alongside modern despair, and the dream of La Dolce Vita is fading for both citizens and newcomers. Number 3. Spain. Spain is rapidly turning into Europe's biggest housing disaster, a nation buckling under the weight of systemic failures and unchecked greed. As of 2025, Spain reports over 200,000 homeless, but NGOs warn the true figure could be double, nearing 350,000. The crisis spans from urban centers to coastal towns, with no region spared. Barcelona and Madrid are in free fall, their streets lined with encampments and despair. Tourism, a cornerstone of Spain's economy, is booming, but locals are being priced out. Entire apartment blocks have been converted into Airbnb units and luxury rentals, leaving long-term renters on the street and forcing families into makeshift shelters or overcrowded flats. Spain's youth are among the hardest hit, with nearly 1 in 5 young Spaniards, aged 18 to 30, either homeless, couch surfing, or living in precarious conditions. Unemployment among this group hovers at 25%, and even those with jobs can't afford rents that have surged 40% since 2022. The non-European population, now over 12% of Spain's total, faces additional struggles, with migrants from Morocco, Venezuela, and Colombia often trapped in low-wage jobs or excluded from housing markets altogether, fueling resentment in some communities. Evictions are a daily occurrence, with courts processing thousands of cases monthly. Squatting has exploded, with abandoned buildings in Valencia and Seville becoming refuges for desperate families and migrants alike. Civil unrest is bubbling, with protests in Barcelona turning violent as residents demand rent controls and housing reform. The government's response, temporary subsidies and limited shelter expansions, falls short, as social services collapses under a 20% spike in demand. Inflation, up 15% for essentials like food and fuel, has pushed even middle-class households to the edge, while small businesses shudder at record rates. Spain's dream, of vibrant cities and sunlit coasts, is collapsing brick by brick. The nation's celebrated lifestyle is now a tense irony, as the homeless crisis reveals a society fractured by inequality, displacement, and a government too slow to act. Number 2. Germany. Germany, Europe's supposed powerhouse, is grappling with the continent's second-worst homelessness crisis in 2025, a stark betrayal of its reputation for stability. Official figures report over 360,000 homeless, but researchers estimate the true number could be as high as 600,000, with unofficial counts swelling in urban centers. Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt are overwhelmed, their public parks dotted with tents and makeshift shelters. Drug zones have emerged in the heart of business districts, with open substance abuse spilling into once orderly streets. Both native Germans and immigrants, many from Syria, Afghanistan, and Nigeria, sleep side by side under train stations and in alleyways, united by desperation. The causes are a toxic mix. Housing speculation has driven rents up 30% in cities like Munich and Berlin since 2022, pricing out even stable earners. A bloated asylum system, strained by over 100,000 new arrivals in 2024 alone, has left migrants and locals competing for scarce resources. The non-European population, now nearing 15% of Germany's total, faces integration challenges, with many trapped in low-wage jobs or excluded from housing altogether. Meanwhile, the middle class is collapsing under 12% inflation for essentials and stagnant wages, pushing delivery drivers, construction workers, and even teachers into homelessness. Social services are buckling, with shelters in Cologne and Dusseldorf turning away hundreds nightly. The government's response, temporary housing subsidies and limited shelter expansions, hasn't dented the crisis. Reports from Stuttgart describe families living in abandoned factories, while in Hamburg, elderly pensioners scavenge for food. Far-right groups are exploiting the chaos, stoking tensions against migrants as public frustration grows. Germany built its wealth on order, but that order is cracking. The nation's economic might is overshadowed by a humanitarian failure, as the homeless crisis exposes a society fraying at the seams. Number 1. United Kingdom. Britain is topping most of my videos these days, but in a negative way. The United Kingdom holds the grim distinction of hosting Europe's most devastating homelessness crisis in 2025, a nation teetering on the edge of a humanitarian collapse. Over 420,000 people are homeless across England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, a figure that dwarfs other European nations. London is the epicenter of suffering, with tents stretching along Oxford Street and encampments spilling into Hyde Park. Homeless veterans, pregnant women, and teenagers are trapped in a relentless spiral of poverty, their lives a stark contrast to the city's wealth. The most shocking revelation? Over 45,000 of the homeless are employed, working as cleaners, retail staff, or delivery drivers by day, only to sleep in cars, doorways, or makeshift shelters by night. The housing crisis is out of control, with rents in London soaring 35% since 2022 and house prices unattainable for most. Brexit's economic fallout, coupled with 15% inflation on food and energy, has gutted the working class, while a paralyzed government, mired in political gridlock, offers little beyond rhetoric. Shelter capacity is maxed out, with NGOs in Manchester and Birmingham reporting waitlists stretching months. Evictions have hit record highs, with over 80,000 households displaced in 2024 alone. The non-European population, now over 10% of the UK's total, faces acute challenges, with migrants from Nigeria, India, and Ukraine often stuck in temporary hostels or on the streets, fueling tensions exploited by far-right groups. In Glasgow, reports describe families living in abandoned warehouses, while in Cardiff, children scavenge for food near tourist hotspots. Britain, once the land of the crown, is now the capital of poverty. The government's patchwork measures, like temporary rent relief, fail to address the crisis's scale. As inequality deepens and social services crumble, the UK's descent into despair shows no signs of stopping. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.